Good morning, welcome to Garden Grounds. We'll get started in like 15 seconds. Welcome to Garden Grounds. I normally do this every second Thursday, fourth Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. However, tomorrow I'm going to be gone, so we're doing it today on Wednesday. This is a public YouTube live event Q&A. So ask any question that you want really related to vegetable gardening. I do a light theme. Today's theme is going to be on fall vegetable gardening, just some of the basics. And I'll talk a little bit about ways to extend the season. But we'll talk about the crops and what actually a fall garden is. But really, this is about me giving time to you all to ask whatever garden questions you want to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Let me just set up the chat here and we can get started. So let me do always first, quick check. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Things look like they're working on this end, but I have been known to talk for a bit with the volume off or with the video not working correctly. And if you have a question, throw one out there. Okay, so Trisha, who is a perk member, you also see people with stars next to their names. I do this mentoring Q&A 4 or 5 times under the perk memberships. It's a much smaller group, very smart group of gardeners, and we kind of help each other out. I mainly am there for a mentor and help people with their questions, but it's a smart group, and what's really cool about it is you can meet gardeners from different gardening zones, different parts of the US, and people help each other out. So Trisha's question is, I just got a GreenStalk. That is a 5-tier vertical tower, which I am affiliated with them. I've been growing with them maybe 7 or 8 years. But if you have a small footprint of a space, you only need like 2 feet, you can put a 5-tier tower in there and grow all kinds of stuff. You can find information about them in the video description. Should I pot up my strawberry plants into it this fall, or should I do it in the spring? Actually, you can do either. I'm in Maryland Zone 7. We do get, regular freezing winters. Temperatures are in the 20s, January, etc. I leave my strawberries in the towers 24/7. They're in my garden 24/7, the ones that are in beds. No issues with the kind of freeze that we get here. You can do either. I'm going to be doing a video for this weekend, actually, transforming a section of a different garden into just fruits. And I'm going to be taking my strawberries that have kind of populated different parts of my ground in my main garden, and I'm going to transplant them into the new space. So it's really up to you. If you're in an area where maybe the temperatures get below 25 degrees Fahrenheit for extended days, and maybe your temperatures drop into the teens, I might just leave them where they are, assuming that they survive winter to winter there, and then transplant them. But strawberry plants are really hardy. They can take a freeze into the teens, even lower. They survive, they come back. So it's really up to you. All right. Julie, when will your episode be on insect dust, etc.? For the perk memberships, that's something we can talk about. I have videos on insect dusts. I probably won't address that topic again, either here on the garden grounds or, really in videos till the spring. Brick, I'm really interested in overwintering more this year. I've dipped my toe in, but I'd like to do more with peppers, mums, petunias, etc. Would love to learn more from an expert like you. So overwintering, you really need more mild temperatures. Now, you can overwinter peppers. They would be perennial plants, really, if the temperatures generally stay above 40. When it gets into the 40s, there's a problem. You can dig them up. You can move them to a greenhouse or something like that if you have a heated greenhouse, but they can't freeze. They can't take a frost, so you have to be able to protect them. Mums are pretty hardy in general here in Maryland. A lot of the mum varieties that we get here survive the winter. Petunias, don't know a lot about that. I'll talk more about it, over time, but if you have a specific question about a crop, please ask that. I have powdery mildew spreading through my squash plants. I cut some of the leaves off when I first noticed it, but it is now spread. It's pretty much done for, or should I ride it out? Dan, if you're not treating it, they're done. Powdery mildew is a fungus. The spores go everywhere when the temperatures are right. 80-degree temperatures, humidity, rain, etc. Different fungi, mildews, like different conditions. They're going to be everywhere. So you really have to spray an antifungal top and bottom sides of the leaves and then contain the spread. And then you can remove leaves. But if you see it on a leaf, it's on the other leaves invisible. So it's spreading everywhere, really. Kim, also a PERC member. I have a 2-foot wide, 4-foot long, 18-inch deep metal container. Grew scallions in it this summer. Went to revive the soil and was full of roots. Tough. Had to dig them out and remove them. Any thoughts? I'm not sure on your question because we know scallions aren't going to leave tough roots. You could have a tree that's close by and the roots grow up into the containers, and that can make, for a problem if you're asking about, the tough roots. But any kind of, shrub, any kind of tree, it's possible the roots made it over to the metal bed and they grew upwards. If it's just from something you grew, then you just have to kind of break the soil up and let it go. If I didn't answer the question, please, clarify a little bit. Big dog. I grow mainly in pots, wicking tubs, and GreenStalks. Do you believe self-made castings, sifted compost, and natural nutrients are worth the effort when not in the ground? Let me think about that for a second. I think it's worth it to set those containers up with it and make sure you have a soil that's pretty, kind of loose, fluffy, etc. And it's good to take some of that stuff and just sprinkle it on top over time as that settles. But for the day-to-day care, really month-to-month care, I think water-soluble fertilizer is the best if that's what you're asking. Containers is kind of a different beast. The microbes and stuff, very similar, but it's a different system. It dries out quickly. Roots suck out the soil, suck out the nutrients really quickly. So you really have to add in my opinion, water-soluble fertilizers more often and more regularly. So I like to use what you described to set up the soil. 2 or 3 years later, when I refresh those container mixes, I add that back in. But in between, I'm really using water-soluble fertilizers. All right, and make sure you put question in front. It looks like people are doing that, so I can pick it out of here. If you want to do a super chat, make a donation, etc., I will answer that with priority. I want to talk a little bit about the fall garden. So fall gardening is really going from obviously summer into fall, into early winter, even into winter in some places. What you're looking for, the perfect temperatures for these cool crops, that's what we typically grow in most of our fall gardens when the temperatures come down. We're looking for 75-ish degree days, 55-degree nights. A little variance is fine. That's what the cool weather crops really like. They like to kind of grow in those cool temperatures. The vegetables taste better. They don't bolt. They don't flower. If you plant them too soon, that's why we don't grow them in the summer. We put them in the hot, summer soil, hot days. They flower and bolt really quickly. Sometimes the seeds don't even germinate. So you're looking for when the temperatures are beginning to fall into that 75, 80 degree Fahrenheit temperature during the day, 55 at night, you're ready for your fall garden. Most of your fall crops can take a freeze, let me restate that, can take a frost, a light frost, even sometimes a heavy frost. The leaves can actually freeze and the plants survive. What I want to talk more about today is, a couple basics. Lettuces, spinach, mustard greens, bok choy, pak choy, radishes, and turnips are great first time crops for people, or just standards to grow into the fall. They can take colder nights, they can take harder frosts, and you can keep growing them well into the winters. We'll talk a little bit as we progress today about covering them and extending the season into the winters in some areas. So for instance, these crops can take a light frost, 32 degrees, 29 degrees, just a little bit below freezing. Some of them can take a harder freeze. A deep freeze is usually considered when your soil freezes to a good inch, and that kills off a lot of your plants. But by just putting some plastic over it, you can grow lettuces, spinach, mustard greens, arugula, let's throw arugula in there, radishes, and turnips for a long period. And it's kind of fun to have something coming out of your garden. All right, let me go and find out where I left off with the questions here. If I've missed your question, please repost it, because the chat goes by pretty quickly when I'm doing this public version. She Marie, what can I do about squirrels digging holes in my potted plants? So you can get chicken wire and you cut a square to the, so that it covers the circle or the size of your container, actually a little bit bigger. And then you kind of bend the sides down because it can be sharp, and you put it over the container, and then you let the plants grow through that. That might not be functional because you have plants in there now, but you can do that next year. Even cut out a hole in there. It stops the squirrel from getting in and digging it up. And sometimes you have to, put a tree branch or a stick or something in there and secure it, because squirrels may kind of lift it up and move it, but you can secure it down. If you have plants growing, you can't do a whole lot because it's hard to really get in there. The squirrels are brave. They're not like rabbits where if they touch something, they don't want to deal with it. Squirrels will move stuff around. I have to trap and release squirrels. Humane. I use black sunflower seeds, the traps that you lift up the sides. The squirrel goes in, steps on the pressure plate, they close, and then I move the squirrel. That's the only thing that I can really do to manage the problem, because they will take my fruits, they will dig in the garden, etc. I have found, just so you know, that the sprays and the scents and the smells, they don't really work. If you wanna, I don't recommend that. Some people say if you feed the squirrels, they stay away from your plants, but then that brings on sometimes more squirrels and more issues. I would just be kind of thinking going forward to using the chicken wire to cover the top of the plant, secure it down, or top of the container, secure it down, and then let the plants grow through there. Love, I have a rodent, ground squirrel, or mice getting in my garden. They are now attacking my potato plants. What's the best way to get rid of them? I'm in the country, 7A, thanks. So squirrels, I do trap, and they trap pretty easily with the black sunflower seeds. Mice and rodents, if that's the issue, and you have to be careful if you have pets and other animals, but they are a problem, and there's no easy, friendly way to get rid of them. So poison baits work with mice and rodents. If you're in the country, I feel like there'd be more snakes and stuff managing the mice and the rodents, and even hawks. That's kind of what I have. I'm not quite in the country, but we're in an open space. Trying to figure out what is actually doing the damage is important, because if it's at night, sometimes it's can be possum or raccoons coming and just digging and looking for grubs, so it might be a bigger issue. I would be kind of leaning towards squirrel, possum, raccoon, digging and looking for things, and really trapping and releasing them is the best way to go about it. Garden Home, I see your question. Please put question in front though so I don't miss it. Can we plant carrots, beets, radishes, cabbage, lettuce now, or is it too late? You can plant all of that. The beets and carrots may not form in time, but they can take a frost and a freeze, so I would give it a try. Any of you that are starting growing your fall garden now, maybe the first time, or you're trying new crops, Just get them into the ground. Mark in a notebook, in a journal, when you put them in. Mark when your first frost shows up. The first frost doesn't mean you're done. It just means that's when the frost is coming. It could be 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks of frosts on and off every week, and these plants still grow. They just start to slow down a whole lot. So I would plant what you want, mark the dates, track when the frosts come in, and then just make some notes so you know if those plants matured to the size that you want, and the next year you know that you can start earlier, or you could start later, or you can kind of just stick with these. If you're going to do cabbage, I would go more towards the Chinese cabbages, the Napa cabbages, the ones that form a little looser heads and mature a little bit more quickly. You're really looking for, carrots, beets, cabbage that's going to be to a mature date within 60 to 70 days, depending on what your temperatures are like. In the kitchen with Susan. I am growing cabbage. The leaves have holes in them. What is going on? Well, you either have snails and slugs coming in and just eating them. They love those leaves. You may have cabbage worms. That white butterfly that flies around could be laying eggs on there. Look around for green worms or army worms. But I would just go with a snail and slug bait. Broadly sprinkle it around your garden, especially for the fall, especially for the spring. They eat those baits, they die off. If you go to, in the video description, you can go to my Amazon shop. I think Corey's slug bait is there. That's what I recommend, or just go to Amazon. If you use my link, it does help me out, which I appreciate and thank you. But the Corey's slug bait, or any of the slug baits that you buy, either have iron phosphate in it or sulfur, and it's pretty mild toxicity for pets and stuff like that. You don't want your animals ever eating that stuff. But it's the most mild. I use it, and it really makes a difference. So that will knock out snails and slugs. If you have cabbage worms or worms or caterpillars chewing on the leaves, you probably have to pick an insect dust to put on there, like spinosad, which is organic, 7 Dust, not organic. It works, but they're both effective, and you would have to lightly dust your crops and get that under control. Old Dominion Homestead. We filled the bottom of our raised beds with logs and sticks to take up space. Now we think it's a mistake because the plants didn't do good at all. Does decomposing wood hurt the soil? Yes. So this is how it works. I have a lot of videos on filling raised beds with logs and debris and stuff that's not broken down. But they are, I can't remember off the top of my head, but let's just say 17 inches to 36 inches high raised beds. The 36-inch beds, you can do the bottom third, logs and sticks and branches and that stuff. The middle third, just any basic, cheap, poor soil. The top third, quality soil. The distance from where you would put your seeds and transplants in a 36-inch, 3-foot, 3-foot raised bed is a good 2 feet. The root systems can get into there. They can do their thing, no issues. If your raised bed was smaller and you put in a lot of logs and stuff and you didn't have a good amount of pure soil above them, the wood pulls the nitrogen out of the soil to decay, and it takes it from your plants, and then your plants suffer, and they may look yellow, stunted, small. So when you do that, you really need at least 17 inches, and you would just want to do just one layer of logs and then have a good, I'd say 12 inches of soil. If you don't have that good 12 inches of soil, the plants can be challenged for nitrogen. That's the same principle that if you mix too many wood chips in that top 4, 6, 8 inches of your soil, the wood chips take nitrogen. Eventually, everything decays and the nitrogen's released back to your soil and everything is okay. So I might think maybe your amount of soil above the wood isn't enough. What you can try and do is jack up the water-soluble nitrogen, and that can help out. But if you have more of a specific question, or if you really don't have that 12 inches of soil above it, you probably want to change that up. All right, looking for more questions. One second. Remember to put question in front. I saw garden home. Can you tell me which variety of spinach we get in the produce store? I know the name. If I know the name, then I can grow them. I don't know what it is. A lot of times I take baby spinach, so it's hard to identify. And a lot of times I use hybrids, and they're just different. I grow, what do I grow? Giant Noble spinach, and that's a really good one. I really like it. You can pick it when the leaves are smaller. You can plant the seeds more closely together. You can do that for the fall and have more baby spinach, or it gets these really nice big leaves. Zoso, how often do you water strawberries in a GreenStalk during the winter, or not at all? So in fall, September, October, I still might have to water them in September once or twice a week because it's been dry here. October, maybe once a week. After October, I just kind of let them go. If we have some weird long period of days of not rain, I might water them, but after November, I really just let them go. Amy, I'm in zone 7. What about enough sunlight in order to grow seeds as fall comes? Thanks for your wisdom. Restate the question if I don't answer it. Enough sunlight is you're going to need at least 6 solid hours. Anything less, things can be kind of just kind of thin and scraggly looking, and they don't look good. But you need a good 6 solid hours. Your leafy greens, radishes are more forgiving, but I still always recommend, and because it's like, nobody I really think goes and tracks exactly how much sunlight is hitting that space. And when the fall comes, the sun shifts, drops down, so some areas will get less light. That's kind of just what happens. In the summer, the sun's up higher, we get more light, it's stronger, it's better for the garden. So I would say you want at least 6 hours. Because we don't know exactly how many hours you're getting, I would do some tests. I would put, a couple lettuce, spinach, arugula, radish seeds in different parts of your growing area at the same time and just see how they do. Take notes, and that's the best way to figure out planting with reduced light or colder falls and stuff like that, is by experimenting in your garden and then taking notes on it. Brick, thanks. The more specific question would be, what are the best practices for digging up plants here in Mass and keeping them indoors during the winter? So the biggest problem, and I've done it, I have videos on the peppers. So when you take a pepper plant out, you need to cut it back, you need to shape it a certain way, you want it to be dormant. When you're taking any plant from the outdoors and bringing it into your house, the life cycle of nature is gone, meaning diseases and pests, eggs in the soil hatch, and bugs can go crazy. So you have to be very careful. So when you're taking a pepper plant out, a lot of times people will shake off the soil, they replant it with fresh soil. I used to put sand on the top to make a barrier so nothing can crawl out. I made sure that there was cardboard in the bottom so nothing could crawl out. Let's just say, I can't remember exactly, but I brought in like 10 pepper plants. 5 survived. They tend to want to grow. So when you're in a 70-degree Fahrenheit house, they tend to want to grow. You have to reduce the watering. Bottom line is, it became more work than to just start my transplants again in January indoors and then get them outside. I get them out early in a sunken cold frame. When the frost is still out there, they get to a nice gallon. I put them in a half-gallon pot. The peppers are big. I put them out. Much easier for me. So my answer is, it's a lot of work, and you probably want to check with somebody else who does it more often than me. But it is a lot of work, and you're going to have to keep an eye on pests and problems from soil being brought into the house. And then those insects can get to your other plants. So you need a dedicated space for that. Hi, Jose. Very glad to teach and share. I appreciate that. All right, trying to see where I'm at here with questions. Give me a second. Wickershire Project. Sounds like a cool name. Gary, are you familiar with potato leaf varieties of tomatoes? Yep. Brandywines are one of them. Okay, yep. Think I grew a type of brandywine. I was enthralled with the look of the plant itself over the fruit. Sea green hue, leaf color. They're really nice. So I grew a yellow brandywine. I think I sell those at my seed shop. My brother helps me, so our seeds change based on what we can get. They're a beautiful leaf. I mean, they're shaped like a potato. Potatoes and tomatoes are related. Some of the leaves get really big. The yellow brandywine produced really well. Sometimes they're a little more susceptible to diseases, but I stayed up on the spraying, and they're in my garden now, and they're really, really beautiful. I really like them. Can I spread mushroom substrate block into garden beds or compost it? It is too dry. It acts hydrophobically. Excuse me a second there. And let me just read the question. You can spread mushroom substrate block into the garden. Eventually it'll get mixed in there. You're not probably putting enough on there to worry about it being hydrophobic. Means it doesn't absorb water right away, and that will just get incorporated into things. When you do spread substrates out in your garden, if you have lots of wood chips and stuff, sometimes you get mushrooms growing in area, but it's really up to you. I mean, I would just make sure, you crumble it up nicely, spread it over the garden bed, and you can just let it sit there. Golden Sparrow, also a perk member. You can see her red-orange star. I planted broccoli and cauliflower and discovered green worms eating the cauliflower leaves. I picked them off. What would you recommend I use? So this is where you have to decide, you want to go organic, you want to use human-made chemical, etc. It's really up to you. You can use a neem oil spray, sell that at my seed shop, spray the top leaves, bottom leaves, and when they eat that, there's a chemical as a directin that shuts down the stomach and kills them off. You can also use BT. You can find that in stores. I don't sell that. You can use spinosad. I find sometimes spinosad doesn't work as quick. It's an insect dust. They crawl on it. They eat it. When they eat the leaf, they die off. Picking them off is good. They're hard to see sometimes. Look down at the stems, right, where the stems join the plant at the bottom, and look on the undersides, and they blend in. And a lot of these worms, it's really kind of cool. Depending on what they're eating, their color changes to match the leaf. So you really have to look closely. If it's a big infestation, I go to 7-Dust chemical. If you don't want to use it, don't use it, but it's really effective. I don't mind using the harsher chemicals on things that are easier for me to wash. A leaf of broccoli, which you can eat, cauliflower, can be washed pretty easily. I wouldn't want to use the 7-Dust on the part that I'm going to eat, the crown of the broccoli or the cauliflower, but putting it out on the leaves can help out. But I would definitely start spraying now, and you want to, next year, you want to start spraying earlier probably so that you cover them up. Most of the time I use neem oil, and it's pretty effective. All right, let me just, again, if I've missed your question, please put it out there. Again, where are we at? Okay, we're at 11:30. We'll go for about 15 more minutes. I want to talk a little bit more about the fall garden. I'm using 8 garden dust on my brassicas. That's similar to 7. I plan on covering them with insect netting. Is that a good idea? I did watch one of your videos on using garden dust. Anytime that you're going to cover your plants, you want to make sure you use an insect dust of your choice or a spray of your choice, and make sure everything's killed off. Because if you put the insect netting on and you have eggs sitting under there, that predatory insects that might come in and deal with the problem insects can't get in there. So you get all these insects under the netting that destroy your plant. So it is a good idea that you're using the dust now. And I would just once you cover it, I would probably use your duster spray of choice for about another 2 weeks, and then I would feel like I've killed off the life cycle of whatever eggs may be on that plant. I'm planning on topping my raised beds off with dried cow manure. How much should I apply? So cow manure is kind of tricky in that if it's been fully decomposed, meaning it sat in a pile for a good year and it broke down and, composted 100% down. The problem when we buy bag products, and I'm not sure if you're buying a bag product, is it can say compost, but it could be not fully broken down, and it could be 20% compost in the process of decaying all the way down. Your own compost, you have had it out there for a year or two, it's fully broken down, you put it in the garden, you put it in the top, you mix it in the soil, it's broken down and it gives to your plants. My point being is if you put in compost that is still decaying, still breaking down, still in that composting process, it's going to take nitrogen from your plant. So assuming that your cow manure is great stuff, it's fully broken down, and it's the best ever, putting down, a good 2 inches across the top of the bed is fine. If it's still in process and you're not sure how good it is, I might just scatter a 1/2 inch or 1 inch. Just let it cover the area, let it break down over the fall, and do it that way. It really depends on the quality. The quality of the compost, and if it's fully decayed and broken down. And that's the problem with bag stuff, is it can say anything on there. It's not regulated. So I would just be cautious. Because you're putting it in now, end of the season, you've got months before you plant in the spring, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have any problem. I'm in Delaware. Where can I buy good compost for my garden? Well, that was a nice segue. I don't know, obviously, because I'm in Maryland. But what I recommend people do is you start looking at local landscape companies, even some of your local government areas, municipalities, whatever, whoever collects the leaves. Sometimes they do a composting, and you can pick that up. So you just have to start looking around. The problem is, as I was saying, sometimes you buy compost from a landscape company and it's a lot of shredded wood and it's not a lot of compost. If you know farmers, if you're lucky enough to be in a place where there's farmers and they're moving their animal manures and they're composting it, sometimes that's better. But then people worry that maybe the cows were eating, chemicals that suppress weeds, and now it's in the compost. It gets really complicated. We kind of overcomplicate it. But you want to talk to local people, build a trusting relationship, check out their products, and that's really the best way to find compost. Bag stuff really is suspect. Big Will Dog, you mentioned liquid fertilizer. Would I need to worry about nutrients staying in the water of my sub-irrigated wicking tubs cycling? What are the signs? I don't really know enough about that. Nitrogen's not usually an issue if I understand it and it's cycling through. It's just going to get used up. If you have higher concentrations of potassium and phosphorus, it can cause issues on your plants. And it's hard to describe. You just kind of have to look it up and see what the plant looks like. But I don't know enough to really guide you on that. Sorry. When putting raised beds to rest for winter, is it important to add compost and mulch those beds, or will mulching for the winter and then removing and adding compost in the spring? There's no real benefits. Kind of going to what I was saying before. If it's great compost, you can put it down now. You can put it down in the spring. If it's compost that's not fully broken down, putting it down in the fall, putting even some mulch over it, letting it sit for 3, 4, 5 months, letting nature break it down can be a benefit. And I do both. Some beds I don't get to, and then I just do it all in the spring. Some beds I put down wood ash for my fire pit. Then I put down some compost, and then I put mulch down, and the mulch is usually compost that's not fully broken down. As long as you're not mixing lots of materials into the top 2, 4, 6, 8 inches of your soil that's not fully broken down, you're not going to have issues of, that product challenging your plants for nitrogen. Desiree, and again, everybody put question in front or I'm going to miss your question most likely. I don't do a lot with bulbs, but if they still have greenery, it's really best to let that greenery stay and the bulb stay because the plant is using it to recharge the bulb. If you feel like it's been long enough and the greenery is dying out and the cold freezes are coming, or the temperatures you want to protect them from are coming, then I would dig them out. You would want to cut it back, but you're really waiting for that greenery to kind of flop over, start yellowing, and then that it's not really pulling energy in to the bulb itself. What do I do if my husband used the wrong sprayer on my raised beds? He used 38 plus. I don't know what 38 plus is, but I'm going to go with the worry is that it's some sort of maybe weed killer or something like that. The residue can harm your plants, can cause twisted leaves. There's not a whole lot that you can do. You can give your plants some water-soluble nitrogen, hope they work their way through it. But then again, I'm not familiar with 38 plus and how much got on there. But if it's a significant amount, it's going to damage your plants. All right, let me pause here. So, great fall crops to grow now: New Gardener, Standards, lettuce, spinach, arugula, radishes, turnips. And then Chinese cabbages are actually pretty good. They mature pretty quickly. And bok choy and pak choy, which are cabbages, they mature very quickly. These plants can take a nice frost, they can take a harder freeze, and they can do really well. You can plant them closely together, you can plant them spaced out, you can do whatever you want based on how you want to harvest them. Lettuces, spinach, arugula, mustard greens too you can grow. If you cut the leaves off, leave the roots in the ground, they'll keep bringing leaves back in the fall. So that's kind of nice. And you can wait for them to be fully mature. You can harvest them as baby greens. Cabbage, you don't have to wait till it gets mature either. You can harvest that as smaller greens. What I recommend is planting them, in a place. I'm putting them in a 3-foot wide space in one area. And I already have, like a 2-foot stake, a clothing line going across, and I'm just going to be pulling 6 mil. You can get 4 mil, MIL, 4 mil or 6 mil greenhouse plastic. And I'll be just pulling that over that bed, and it'll be like a tent, and just weighing down the sides. 2 feet is nice because it's lower to the ground. If you go, and that's kind of like a low tunnel. The higher you go up with your plastics and stuff like that, the more colder air you get, the more heat you need, the more the cold settles. When you bring the plastic down low to 2 feet, 1 foot, the warmth of the earth keeps that space warmer than the outside. So that means these plants are getting less of a deep freeze that would kill them off. They can go longer. It's a nice little warmer environment in there, and you can grow those crops way longer into the winter here. Like I can almost probably grow those into the beginning of January. So the idea is put your crops in a place where it's real easy to pull the plastic over. If you don't want to buy the garden plastics, the greenhouse plastics, you can get the thicker painter tarps. Don't get the real thin, flimsy ones. You need the thicker ones, and you can do the same thing. By using the greenhouse plastic, you can pull it over and you can let it be, especially when you're getting later into November, December here, and enough sunlight gets in and they're okay and they do their thing. Sometimes people use different tarps and stuff like that just to protect the plants from a nightly frost or a nightly freeze. You can do that. But if you plan on really growing far into late fall, early winter, or through the winter, you definitely want to use the greenhouse tarps. And remember, the lower you keep it, the better the earth warms that space and it stays warmer than if you have a big, tunnel over it or something like that. All right, so 38 plus is a pyrethrum, or I can never say anything, but you get what I'm trying to say. Um, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You know, I was concerned that it was some sort of weed killer. That was going to be a problem. It's sprayed on there. Just let it do its thing and let it go away. If you're worried there's a concentration on the plants, I would just hose it and wash it off and just let it be. But it's not something to over worry about. It's just going to go away. It may, you know, harm some good insects or something like that. But the only time I might worry, like I wouldn't care if that was on like something I can wash or something with a thick leaf. Like it was covered over my spinach, my arugula, my lettuces. I'd be more worried about ingesting that. And it's hard to wash off of that. But any other crop, I'll just rinse it off, let it rain, let it be, wash that stuff for a little bit better for a couple of weeks and let it go. If you, Lulu, and I see somebody helping out, if your tomatoes get a brown bottom, that's blossom end rot. That means the root systems can't pull calcium in, the nutrients it needs, so the plant takes the nutrients from the lower fruit, sends the nutrients to the top of the plant. It's usually done because it's container plants, the watering is inconsistent, they can't access the calcium that's in the soil and the other nutrients in the soil, so the plant feeds on itself. So all you can really do is get back to watering and keep it consistent. Add in some water-soluble fertilizers. If you're worried that it's because your soil does not have calcium, you can just take garden lime, mix it with some water, pour it around the plant. That lets you know you have calcium in there. But then you have to kind of just make sure you keep up with the watering. You can pick tomatoes with blossom end rot. You can cut it off. You can use the other portions. But you can't fix that damaged tomato. But you can try and change the conditions of the soil around the roots so that the future tomatoes are okay. Garden Home, what's the best organic fertilizer to buy for my vegetable garden? The truth is they're all pretty effective. I like AgroThrive. I've been working with them for several years. I'm affiliated with them, and it's a nice balanced organic fertilizer, and it's not pulverized fish or rotted fish or anything like that. And the reason I like it, one, it works. Two, it's a good breakdown of NP and K, and you can go to AgroThrive. Just go ahead and look in the video description. You'll see a link there. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so when I started bringing my dog Willow into the garden more, and I used to use fish emulsion, and I still have fish emulsion left. I'm finishing that up. But as soon as I would put that in the ground, she would just be eating the soil. So I had to switch over to something, found AgroThrive, loved how it really helps the plants grow, and then my dog leaves it alone. So that's the benefit. But if you're on a budget, any organic water soluble is going to work that fits your budget. Tiny Purple, when ripening tomatoes, will it help to cover them at night to keep them warm? Not really. I don't know of any way that tomatoes ripen faster when you're outside. So if you are concerned and if they're just starting to go from green and blush a little bit, just pick them and bring them in the house, and you can let them sit on a windowsill, and they're gonna, they're gonna ripen that way. But there's no real trick to speed up anything. You can't speed up how quickly a tomato turns, even though you're gonna see a lot of stuff turns from green to red. You're not gonna speed up how quickly they grow. You can't really increase the number of tomatoes. The only thing you can really do is protect them when the temperatures get way too hot. Peppers and tomatoes, when the temperatures get hot, the soil temperatures heat up, root system heats up, they will drop blossoms, they will stop producing flowers, they may abort tomatoes and peppers. It's too hot, so they go into survival mode. So putting a shade cloth over them, the high heat of summer, keeps your tomatoes and your peppers going and producing. Same thing for cucumbers. It can help cucumbers. But I do it mostly for tomatoes and then peppers. helps them stay cooler, they get enough light, and they keep producing. Yeah, I'm very glad that the accidental spray was not a weed killer. And again, people are mentioning it. Just rinse it down and let it go. Let the sunlight break it down and, wash things a little bit better. Brick. Potato leaf brandywine heirlooms. I tried one for the first time in addition to my regular tomatoes. It took all year to become a tree and it's just now fruiting. Is that normal? It is normal, depending on the variety. Sometimes the red ones take longer. There's a lot of different brandywine types. However, my yellow one and yellow brandywine started producing really, I think, mid-July. So that one produced a little bit sooner. But they can get really big. You take care of them. They're beautiful. But they don't produce as much fruit as some of the other heirlooms or even the hybrids. And remember, hybrids aren't GMOs. They're just people crossed pollen. It's perfectly normal, perfectly safe. So some tomato plants are better at just producing much more fruit. The brandywines don't produce a ton, at least in my experience. Where are we at on time? Ooh, 11:46. So for the Publix, I usually go 45 minutes. I'll stay on for another 14 minutes. We'll make it an hour. Always talking about garden questions, light theme. We talked about fall gardening today. If you like this format, please subscribe. Actually, I think in order to ask a question, you have to be subscribed. But if you're just kind of watching, please subscribe so you can ask a question. But you also get reminders. Every second Thursday and fourth Thursday at 11 a.m. I do this public garden grounds. If you want more, for like $7 or $8 a month, I have perk memberships and I do this 4 or 5 times with a much smaller group, can answer all the questions, and it's a lot easier to get, kind of mentoring help that way. All right, let's see. Brandywine, I'm just finding where I left off. Feder, why would a tomato plant look droopy even though the ground is moist? So there are reasons, like it could have a virus, maybe it got too cold, there's something affecting the roots. Without seeing more, it's hard to tell. Sometimes smaller plants are more apt to have issues and look a little bit droopy, but it's not typically normal. A plant can droop if it's really hot and it's just dropping its leaves. It's going from kind of rigid leaves to droopy leaves. That's a way it's surviving with the high heat. So high heat can do it too. The bulk of fertilizers, synthetic or organic, which contains chain proteins, all the same once the soil microbes have fully accessed it. Everything gets broken down into its elemental form. I agree with that. You can overdo it sometimes with the chemical fertilizers or the synthetic fertilizers. And this is my soapbox, so real quick. Synthetic means synthesized. It means people had to do a process to it to make it get to a form. It's not synthetic as in like synthetic leather or fake or anything like that. And that's where people get confused. You can't make fake nitrogen. You can't make fake potassium. You can't make fake phosphorus, yeah, magnesium, calcium, sulfur, all the 6 mains that plants need. However, you can use synthetic fertilizers in concentrations that are too high. They don't necessarily feed the soil like organic fertilizers do. But the myth with organic fertilizers is that you can just use organic fertilizers and you have great soil. That's not true either. Any kind of fertilizer you're using, being synthetic or organic or whatever, that's like a vitamin. You're just kind of scattering it around, getting the plants what they need. In order to have a beautiful, thriving garden, you have to use organic matter. You have to put in a lot of compost. You have to put in a lot of decaying plant material to really build up that soil and give a place for the microbes to live, for the microorganisms to live, for the root systems to live, for the fungi to live. So using whatever you want to use, if you use the synthetic fertilizers or the organic fertilizers, you're just supplementing. You're not building soil. You're not doing anything technically great. If you're not using lots of organic matter and compost, your soil is going to suffer. That's the short version. And I understand, like some people want to be all organic, but when you get to all organic, you're using blood from cattle, you're using crushed steamed cattle bones, you're using a lot of products that are just waste products. They're kind of expensive. So you just want to be wise and learn about what you're using, and use whatever fits your budget. All right, where are we at? 10 more minutes. Let me find some questions. Yeah, so also, this is a subject I really like. To fertilize or to use compost. Compost, homemade with love, is much better because you made it. So compost is always best to use. And I know that we can't all just make it. We don't all have the space. So we use the supplemental fertilizers to manage the area. In containers, I use more water-soluble fertilizer, even though I have compost in it. The more you can progress to using your own compost and using the resources on your property or sharing resources with neighbors, to me that's really what organic gardening is. It's going out and using what's around your property, using the materials that fall, letting them decompose, getting them into the garden. Anytime you're going out and you're buying a product, you're buying a product. And that's where it can get costly. There are probably better fertilizers to use, but if you use them as directed, no matter what fertilizer you use, you're not going to do harm. Like, people hate Miracle-Gro. They hate the company. If you hate the company, that's fine. If you use water-soluble Miracle-Gro 24/7 at its recommended rate all the time, the plants are going to look okay, but you're not going to have anything going on in your soil. You're not feeding microbes anymore. But if you use it, once in the spring during an emergency, you don't harm anything. You don't cause any problems. My point being, again, I just want to stress it, is the compost. It doesn't matter what you use as a additive fertilizer. If you're not building the soil up with compost, your plants are going to be dependent on whatever you buy and throw in there. You have to get that organic matter in there to build a beautiful kind of ecosystem in the soil. And there's a lot more to it. Like, we can split hairs and say this is good, this is bad. But generally speaking, compost is what makes your garden thrive. And it holds water and moisture. You have to water less. Your plants get less sick because they just are able to access everything slowly and consistently. And you just get these beautiful plants that fight off diseases and pests a little bit better. All right, so yeah, I'm doing a video on a GMO tomato. It's purple. It's called purple tomato. It is a Snapdragon DNA thrown into a tomato DNA. It's a tomato that is pure purple all the way through. They don't exist. It was human made. I grew it because I was curious, and I'll be doing a video on it. GMOs, personally, people blast me sometimes. I don't mind them. What I mind is a GMO that's built to withstand chemical dousings of weed and grass killer and stuff like that. I don't want that. I don't want to be eating a GMO that's been soaking up chemicals. If some scientists or people create this cool, no harm, no foul vegetable, I'll give it a try, see what it does, and I'll be talking about that. Yeah, I don't see any more questions. So if you guys have any last questions, throw them out there. If I missed your question, please throw it out there. So yeah, and I see a little bit of the conversation. So before that purple tomato was created last year, we couldn't buy a GMO. You could if you had thousands of dollars in signed contracts. So all the GMOs prior to that, that's not like when you see a seed pack and it says non-GMO. Every seed pack is non-GMO. Like somebody thought to do it. It's like saying super white toothpaste or deep cleaning toothpaste. It's just something that doesn't matter. So once one person put on non-GMO seeds on their seed packet, everybody else had to follow. And it made this belief that you could buy seeds that were GMOs and that GMOs are bad. It's how they're used, in my opinion, that they're bad. So anyway, it was true up until this purple tomato that you and I could never buy a GMO seed because you would have to buy thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars worth of corn or the GMO seeds because they're highly protected. You would have to sign documents saying that you're not going to share the seed or you're not going to breed it or you're not going to collect the seed, all kinds of stuff. So it was really out of our hands. So the GMOs are really used more for kind of food production and big scale farming. All I want is, I'm going to stay on the soapbox, I guess, is I want to know if there's a GMO vegetable in what I'm consuming. Like, so if it's corn, if it just says corn, cool, it's corn. If it says G, corn, then it's a GMO corn. And then I want to know, how is that grown? Is that grown because they're dousing everything with a weed killer and grass killer and, you know, the plant soaking it up? Or maybe it was a genetically modified, let's just say beet, and it's just grown normally and it's been modified so that disease doesn't kill it off and then it grows better. I won't mind eating that. I personally want to know that it's a genetically modified vegetable that I'm consuming, and then I want to be able to learn why was it genetically modified and how is it being grown. All right. Is there a brand of compost other than Leaf Grow that you can recommend? So Leaf Grow comes from our dump. They basically collect all the leaves, they put it in an area, they compost it. That's local to Maryland. I recommend that. And that was kind of what I was saying in the beginning of the video to some of these questions, is you have to go and see what's around. But I don't have one that I recommend besides that. The Leaf Grow I recommend because it comes out of Montgomery County here in the Maryland area. I'm in Howard County. It's in our Home Depots, it's in our Lowe's, and it's a good basic product. So this is a good question, and what am I excited to grow or change up in the garden for 2025? So I'm always excited about growing new things. I just look around and I enjoy that January and February. I'm in the process of always trying to simplify my garden, grow a little bit differently, love changing up the beds, the trellising. I'm changing I don't know if I'll have the video this weekend, but I'm changing another garden I have all over to a fruit garden. I was just duplicating tomatoes and peppers over there. I wasn't taking care of them. That space is overgrown. So now is a great time too, by the way, for the fall to put in your fruit trees, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries into the ground. Plants that are going to survive your winters, it's a good time to plant them in there. And I will be looking for new crops, just new varieties of things. The purple tomato, just, you know, FYI, it's cool looking, high in anthocyanin, looks good in dishes. Flavor, you know, it's not impressive. It's really being grown because it's purple and it has the anthocyanin in it, which is supposed to be the purple color, which is supposed to be a health benefit. How much one needs, I don't know. If you let that purple GMO get a little bit riper, it has some sweetness to it. But I'll be looking for heirlooms. I'll be looking for different kinds of beans next year to grow. Things that maybe I haven't grown before that are coming out of other countries or grown commonly in other countries. We'll see. You know, it's always fun. What are the chances of growing the seeds that birds drop? A bird dropped a cherry tomato seed in my garden. They're pretty good. I have wine berries that are these are kind of invasive berries that are in Maryland. I don't mind them, so I don't care that they're filling up my wooded area. But they spread pretty easily. Raspberries do. I mean, the chances are pretty decent. tomato seeds are coated in this gel. They go through a digestive system of a bird. That coating's removed. The seed's viable. We'll see. I don't think it's 100%, but I think you have a 50-50 chance of it doing its thing. How I do, I mean, just thinking about it. Oh wait, I lost the question. How do you know it's a cherry tomato seed? Would be my question. But you grow it, see what it comes to be. Question, how long do my seed packages last? Most of mine, the dates on seed packages are just so that, in my opinion, you know when they came out, so that you know that they have a date. Also, so that then we think, oh, it's old, we need to buy a new one. Seeds can last easily 2-3 years for something that sometimes, like lettuces, 2-3, maybe 4 years. They tend to dry out faster. Tomato seeds can last 5-10 years. Pepper seeds, 5-10 years. A lot of seeds can last years and years and years. Put them in a Ziploc bag, store them in a refrigerator if you want a little bit more protection to them. But if they're stored in a house in a Ziploc bag, they can last for a really long time. So I am adding in different berries, haskcaps or honeysuckle. I'm trying to think of what I have. I don't know if I have that. I've been trying to grow different bushes and berry bushes and stuff like that. I'm not having great success with them, but I will jot that down and look into it. All right. I think we're at the last question here. Is there any difference in winter prepping an in-ground garden versus raised beds? This is my first year with an in-ground garden, and I'm not sure if any extra work is required. There's not really any extra work. In-ground bed, I consider just the earth. A raised bed that's 6 or 8 inches, I consider a framed bed. It's basically the same. I like a framed bed because you just put the resources in the frame and saves you some money. When I get to a raised bed that's 17 inches, 32 inches tall, that's more of a raised bed. There is some difference, but nothing to really, I think, worry about. You just want to add compost to them if you have it, to all of them, and you build the soil and the garden soil slowly over time. All right, I think we'll call it a day. Good luck in your gardens. Every second and fourth Thursday, 11 a.m., I do the garden grounds, and it's public. If you're interested, check out my video description for perk memberships. If you're interested in AgroThrive or the GreenStalk garden towers, they're also in my video description. All right, you guys have a